Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. In today's class, we are going to talk about the general anatomy of muscles. We know that muscles are contractile tissues which are responsible for the body movements. It forms the red flesh and accounts for 40% of the total body weight. The muscle tissue is derived from the mesodermal layer of the embryo and is composed of differentiated cells containing some contractile proteins, which generate the force responsible for the movement of the body as well as the individual organs. A muscle can be defined as a contractile tissue which can bring about the movement of organs and the body as a whole. It is interesting as well as important to know that all the muscles develop from the mesodermal layer of the embryo except some, namely the erector pili muscles, the muscles of the iris, and the myoepithelial cells of glands, which develop from the ectodermal layer. Now, on the basis of morphological and functional characteristics, the muscle tissue can be divided into three types, namely the skeletal muscles, the cardiac muscles, and the smooth muscles.
The skeletal muscles are attached to the body skeleton. The cardiac muscles form the musculature of the heart, whereas the smooth muscles form the wall of the viscera of the body. Apart from these three defined classifications, there are some contractile cells which functions as single units. These are myoepithelial cells. The myoepithelial cells are spindle-shaped cells containing contractile protein, the actin filaments. Present at the basis of the secretory acini of glands, the myoepithelial cells lies between the basement membrane and the peripheral surface of the epithelial cells, and they play an important role in expulsion of secretion of the acini of various glands. Another class of contractile cells are the myofibroblasts, and they are related to contraction of the scar tissue during wound healing. Even though the skeletal, cardiac, and the smooth muscles differ from each other in terms of structure and function, they follow certain basic properties. First, irritability, that is, sensitive to the stimulus. Second, the contractility, that is, when stimulated, the muscle contracts over its length, leading to its shortening. Extensibility, once the original stimulus is removed, the muscle fibers returns to their original length. Elasticity, muscles tend to assume a desired shape regardless of how it might be stretched.
Let's move on and talk about the individual muscles. Skeletal muscles. This is the most abundant and is located superficially. These skeletal muscles are attached to the skeleton of the body. They act as levers to move the body as well as its appendages during various body movements. Even when we are relaxed, the skeletal muscles responsible for maintaining the body posture are always at work and they remain in constant contraction. Another important function of these skeletal muscles is production of heat. As a byproduct, during increased internal metabolism, like while doing exercises. When examined microscopically, the skeletal muscle is made up of muscle fibers and supporting connective tissue. The delicate supporting connective tissue surrounding an individual muscle fiber is called an endomysium. Each bundle of muscle fiber, commonly called fasciculus, is surrounded by another relatively thick connective tissue covering called the perimysium. Finally, a group of fasciculus, which forms a muscle, is covered by an overall layer of connective tissue that is called the epimysium. At the junction of a muscle belly and a tendon, through which the muscles are inserted into bones, all these layers of connective tissues become continuous with the fibers of the tendon. When we look at the muscle fibers, the length of the skeletal muscle fiber ranges from 1 to 40 millimeter. Each muscle fiber or myocyte is cylindrical in shape, consisting of multiple nucleus, and there are presence of cross striations. The nucleus is oval, located at the periphery of the fiber under the plasma membrane, which is called the sarcolemma. The cytoplasm or the sarcoplasm of a myocyte presents longitudinally arranged bundles of myofibrils, which are further made up of contractile proteinaceous filaments, which are called myofilaments. Now, these myofilaments can be of two types, actin and myosin. The cross striations encountered in these myocytes of the skeletal muscles is a result of the regular arrangement of these myofilaments.
Let us try to understand it better. When seen under a light microscope, the cytoplasm of a muscle fiber can be seen to have striations. Now, these are produced due to alternate dark and light bands present in their cytoplasm. With polarized light, the band seen dark in the light microscopy is anisotropic, while those appearing light in light microscopy are isotropic. Accordingly, they are called the A and the I band, which stands for anisotropic and isotropic. If we look at the striations carefully, we'll find that they are produced due to an arrangement of the myofilaments. These are of two types, actin and myosin, and these are made up of molecules of corresponding proteins. Each myosin filament is about 12 nanometer in diameter, while an actin filament is about 8 nanometer in diameter. Therefore, they are referred to as thick and thin filaments. The actin filaments are attached at one end of the Z band, and from here they pass through the I band, and they extend into the outer parts of the A band, where they interdigitate with the myosin filaments. Note that the I band is made up of actin filaments alone. The H band represents the part of the A band into which the actin filaments do not extend. The Z band is really a complicated network at which the actin filaments of the adjoining sarcomeres meet. Again, the M band is produced by fine interconnections between the adjacent myosin filaments.
Let's discuss it again to get a much clearer picture. If we look at the dark or the A band, we will find that it consists of an area almost at the center of it where only the myosin or the thick filaments are present. This area is called the H band. Then again, the same A band consists of an area on either side of the H band where both these filaments are present overlapping each other at regular intervals. Further, if we see the H band, there is a dark line in its center which is called the M line or the M band. This is the line where the myosin filaments are held together. The light band or the I band on either side of the A band can be seen to be having only actin filaments. The center of it is dissected by the Z line or the Z disc. The actin filaments of adjoining sarcomeres meet along this Z line. The region of a myofibril in between two Z lines is called a sarcomere, and it is the contractile unit of a myofibril. The H band or the H zone is named after Hansen, who first described it. The Z and the M band got their names from German. Z stands for Zwischenschieb. Zwischen means between and Schieb means the disc. It means a line, which is the Z line, that lies between the two sarcomeres or disc. The letter M for the M band is from the German word Mittelschieb. Mittel means middle, since it lies in the middle of a disc or the sarcomere. The actin and myosin are myofilament. The thick myosin is the most abundant myofibrillar protein and accounts for up to 60% of the contractile protein. On the other hand, together the actin and the troponin constitutes the thin myofilament.
The distance between the Z line is the sarcomere, that is the functional unit of a myofilament. Now, during the muscular contraction, the actin filament slides in between the myosin filaments towards the center of a sarcomere or the M band. This makes a part of the I band slide inside the A band. Thus, decreasing the width of the I band and simultaneously making the H band disappear. The width of the A band corresponds to the length of the myosin filament and thus is not altered during the contraction process. To understand the mechanism by which the actin filaments slides into the A band, we have to know the structure of actin and myosin filaments in a greater detail.
Each actin filament is further composed of two subfilaments that are twisted around each other. Each subfilament is a chain of globular or rounded molecules. These globular molecules are G-actin, and the chain formed by them is designated as F-actin. Each actin filament has a head end that extends into the A band and a tail end that is anchored to the Z line. The filament also contains two other proteins called tropomyosin and troponin. Tropomyosin is in the form of a long fiber that winds around the actin and stabilizes it. Troponin is a complex made up of several fractions. These complexes are arranged regularly over the actin fiber and represent the sites at which the myosin will bind. Each myosin filament is made up of a large number of myosin molecules. Each molecule is made up of two units. Each unit has a head and a tail. The tails are coiled over each other. A myosin filament is a bundle of the tails of such molecules. The heads project outwards from the bundle as projections of the myosin filament. The projecting heads are arranged in a regular helical manner. Because of the manner in which it is formed, each myosin fibril can be said to have a head end and a tail end. The tail end is attached to the M line. Movement of the myofibril and thus a myocyte and the muscle is produced by the interaction of the actin and the myosin filaments as follows. The myosin filaments establish bonds with the adjoining actin filaments. After making a bond, a head probably bends, dragging the actin filament with it. The original bond is now broken. The head unbends and establishes another bond with the next part of the actin filament. These bonds are made and unmade in rapid succession, dragging the actin filaments into the intervals between the myosin filaments. This is the probable mechanism for shortening of the myofibrils, and hence for the contraction of muscle. The actin and myosin filaments must be arranged in a precise geometrical fashion for the successful operation of such a system. The energy for repeated binding and release of the heads of myosin molecules to actin molecules is derived from the hydrolysis of ATP. ATP binds to the myosin head. When the head comes in contact with an actin, the ATP is hydrolyzed to form ADP and phosphate. This leads to firm binding of the head of the myosin to the actin. After a short interval, ADP is released by the head, which now separates from the actin. Fresh ATP binds to the head and the cycle is repeated. Each muscle fiber consists of a cytoskeleton. The fibers of the cytoskeleton are linked to the actin fibers. The cytoskeleton is also linked to the external lamina through glycoproteins present in the cell membrane. Forces generated within the fiber are thus transmitted to the external lamina. The external lamina is in turn attached to the connective tissue around the muscle fibers. A number of proteins are responsible for these linkages. Genetic defects affecting these proteins can result in abnormalities in muscles, like muscle dystrophies.
Apart from the energy release from ATP, the sliding of the myofilaments resulting in the contraction of the skeletal muscles needs release of the calcium ions from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The sarcoplasmic reticulum lies in the cytoplasm or the sarcoplasm of the myofibrils. These lie at the level of every junction between an A and an I band of a myofibril and consist of three closely connected tubules that are commonly called the muscle triad. The upper and the lower tubules of the triad are connected to the tubules of the adjoining triads through a network of smaller tubules distributed along the A and the I band. These networks along with the upper and the lower tubules of the triad, constitute the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The middle tube of the triad is an entity independent of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It is called a centrotubule and belongs to what is called the T system of membranes. The centrotubules are actually an invagination of the sarcolemma into the sarcoplasm. Their lumina are therefore in communication with the exterior of the muscle fiber. In a relaxed muscle, the calcium ions are strongly bound to the membranes of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. When a nerve stimulus reaches a motor end plate, the sarcolemma is depolarized. This depolarization wave is transmitted to the interior of the muscle fiber through the centrotubules. As a result of it, the calcium ions are released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum into the myofibrils and thus causing their contraction.
Let us now talk about the types of skeletal muscle fibers. Within the skeletal muscles, there are two types of fibers. The first one is called the type 1 fiber or the red fibers. The second is the type 2 fibers or the white fibers. The red fibers are slow twitch fibers. That means their speed of contraction is slow, but it is well sustained. Both of these fibers have different characteristic features based on many parameters. As we just discussed, the speed of contraction is slow in the red fibers and fast in the white fibers. If we talk about fatigability, the red fibers are comparatively fatigue resistant while white fibers are fatigue susceptible. The red fibers are rich in blood supply while the white fibers have a poor blood supply. If we talk about myoglobin content, the red fibers have a very high myoglobin content, while in the white fibers, the myoglobin content is low. The red fibers can generate ATP by aerobic glycolysis, and white fibers generate ATP by anaerobic glycolysis. The red fibers have a large number of mitochondria, while the number of mitochondria is very few in the white fibers. Glycogen content is high in the red fibers and low in the white fibers. The diameters of the red fibers are smaller, while the diameters of the white fibers are comparatively larger. The red fibers are mostly seen in the postural muscles, and white fibers are very commonly seen in the extraocular muscles.
The arrangement of the muscle fibers in an individual muscle are different, and it entirely depends on the function of the muscle concerned. Parallel fasciculi. These fasciculi run parallel to the line of the muscle pull, and such muscle contract over a great distance and have a maximum range of movements and good endurance. They may be quadrilateral like thyroid, pronator quadratus, or may be strap-like like infrahyoid and sartorius. Strap-like with tendinous intersections like rectus abdominis or fusiform like biceps and digastric. There can be convergent fasciculi. Now these type of convergent fasciculi are converging at the point of insertion to maximize muscle contraction. Even though having a less range of movements, the muscles with this type of arrangements are powerful. The examples are adductor longus and temporalis. There can be spiral or twisted fasciculus like present in the latissimus dorsi, supinator, or pectoralis major. Some of the fasciculus are arranged in superficial and deep planes and are crossing each other, like sternocleidomastoid muscle, masseter, adductor magnus, and this type of arrangement is known as a cruciate arrangement. Sphincteric fasciculi are present where there is an opening, it surrounds an opening, and the contraction can close an opening. The examples are orbicularis oculi and orbicularis oris. There can be pennate fasciculi. Now these muscle resembles a feather, which stands for the term pennate. The fleshy fibers corresponding to the bars of the feather and the tendons to the shaft as they are inserted by the tendon. They have many fibers per unit area, making them strong.
Now there are different varieties of pennate fibers. These may be unipinnate. These are linear origin fibers with appearance of half of a feather. Examples: extensor digitorum longus, flexor pollicis longus. These may be bipinnate, when the fibers resemble the whole of a feather with two origins. Examples include flexor hallucis longus and the dorsal interossei. These may be multipinnate, when the septa extends into the origin and insertion, the fibers appear to be made up of many feathers. Or these fibers may be circumpinnate. In these, the fibers converge from the wall of a cylindrical space to a buried central tendon, like the tibialis anterior. The muscles are commonly given names according to many factors. It may be according to locations, like tibialis anterior for the anterior aspect of tibia and temporalis for the temporal fossa. The muscles may be named according to shape, like the trapezius, which has a trapezoid shape, or the quadratus femoris, which has a quadrangular shape. The muscles may be named according to action, like extensor carpi ulnaris. This is responsible for the extension of the wrist or carpus. The muscles may also be named according to the number of heads. For example, the biceps brachii consists of 2 heads and the triceps brachii consists of 3 heads. The naming of muscles may also be according to its attachments. For example, the sternocleidomastoid muscle has attachments to the sternum, the clavicle, and the mastoid process. Some muscles are named according to the direction of fibers. For example, rectus femoris is a muscle that's lying straight in front of the femur. Some muscles are named according to the size. For example, gluteus maximus is the largest of the gluteal muscles, while gluteus minimus is the smallest of the gluteal muscles. Now, when we look at a typical skeletal muscle, it is usually elongated, spans one or more joints, and attaches to a bone on either side by a tendon. During contraction of a muscle, one of the bones moves relative to the other at a joint. The relatively fixed attachment is usually referred to as the origin, and the movable end is called the insertion. Further, a skeletal muscle has got 2 parts: a thickened fleshy part called the belly, which is the contractile part, and a cord or rope-like part called the tendon, which usually spans a joint and is attached to a bone. A tendon is formed by dense regular connective tissue connecting the muscle belly to the periosteum of the bone. Its function is to transfer the force of contraction from the muscle across the joint to the bone that has to be moved. If these tendons are flattened, the flattened sheets of tendons are called aponeurosis. Wherever a muscle tendon is subjected to friction, a lubricating device called a synovial bursa or a synovial sheath is always interposed. The muscle cells have high rate of metabolic activity. Hence, they require extensive vascularity to receive nutrients and oxygen and to eliminate waste products. Smaller muscles are generally supplied by a single artery and perhaps 2 veins to return the blood. Large muscles are usually supplied by several sets of arteries and veins. As far as the nerve supply of the muscles go, the nerves enter the muscles at one or more points called the neurovascular hyla. These are fairly constant in location. Generally, the nerve supplying the muscle is called the motor nerve, but strictly speaking, it is a mixed nerve. It contains both sensory as well as motor fibers. A neuromuscular junction, also called a myoneural junction, is the junction between the terminal end of axon, which is the motor end plate, and the sarcolemma of a muscle fiber, which is also called the sole plate. When a motor nerve penetrates a muscle, it divides into a number of branches. The terminal end of the axon contacts the sarcolemma of the muscle fibers. There is a small gap between the plasma membrane of the axon terminal and the plasma membrane of the muscle cell, which is the sarcolemma. This is called the synaptic cleft or the neuromuscular cleft. Let us discuss the action of muscles. When muscles contract, it brings about a movement. The range of the movement depends on the length of the fibers in the fleshy part and the power generated during the contraction. A muscle tone is referred to the constant tension produced by the muscles for long periods of time. Muscle tone is responsible for keeping our back and legs straight. A muscle contraction is described in different terms. Number one is isometric contraction. In isometric contraction, the length of the muscle does not change, but the tension does increase. Example is holding the arm outstretched. In isotonic contraction, the amount of tension produced by the muscle is constant during the contraction, but the length of the muscle changes. For example, movements of the fingers and hands. The next is called concentric contraction. The muscle produces increase in tension as it shortens. A large percentage of movements produced by muscle contractions are concentric contractions. Number 4, eccentric contractions. In eccentric contractions, the tension is maintained in muscle while the muscle increases in length. An example is lowering the arm to the side of the body. Let us talk about another concept called the group action of muscles. A single muscle does not contract alone. Each movement requires contraction or relaxation of a whole group of muscles. Further, each movement is brought about by a coordinated activity of different group of muscles. These muscle groups are classified according to the role played by them in the occurrence of a particular action. Number 1 is the prime movers or the agonists. These muscles are primarily responsible for producing a desired movement. For example, the biceps brachii is acting as a prime mover when it produces flexion at the elbow. Second is the antagonist muscle. An antagonist muscle is the muscle which is able to produce the movement opposite to the prime mover. Usually, however, the two muscles, the agonist and the antagonist, act in unison, so that when the prime mover contracts, its antagonist undergoes a simultaneous relaxation. In this way, an accurate controlled movement is carried out. Example, in flexion of the elbow, the biceps act as the prime movers while the triceps act as an antagonist muscle. These muscles reverse their roles in the extension of the elbow. The third group of muscles is called the fixators. A muscle is said to be A muscle is said to act as a fixator when it contracts to stabilize the origin of the prime mover so that it can act efficiently. For example, the muscles attaching the shoulder girdle to the trunk contract as fixators to allow the deltoid to act on the shoulder joint to produce abduction. Fourth group is called synergist. When the prime mover crosses more than one joint to reach the joint where its main action takes place, then the undesired movement at the proximal joint is prevented by certain muscles which are called the synergist. Example, the long flexors of the fingers crosses the wrist joint and can flex it, but this movement is disadvantageous if it is desired to clench the fist. The extensors of the wrist therefore contract as synergists to prevent wrist flexion. These terms are applied for a particular muscle during a particular movement. One muscle can act as a prime mover, as an antagonist, a fixator, or a synergist depending upon the movement that is desired to be accomplished. So folks, that's all we have for you today. Stay tuned to Anatomy Weekly. Keep watching, keep learning. We'll see you next time. Thank you.